Welcome in. It's our special Wednesday edition of the Minnesota Football Party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making us your first watch or listen on this Wednesday. For your second one, check out Locked On Vikings with Luke Braun, daily Vikings content you can find over there, and find our audio, the Locked On Vikings podcast feed. We'll meet our full crew here in a second, but KOC signs an extension to stay with Minnesota long-term. No-brainer. Was always going to happen. We'll talk about a little bit off the KOC extension, what it means, and the division is shuffling coaches. Ben Johnson goes from the Lions to the Bears. The Lions need to find new coordinators. How does that shift the balance of power in the NFC North, plus some divisional round what-ifs and bold predictions for the championship round? It's all on today's show that is brought to you by FanDuel. Got to take advantage of this deal. New customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets. If you win your first bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. Just 2 weekends left of real NFL football this year. Let's meet today's panel on the Minnesota Football Party.
Reggie Wilson, sports director at Care 11. And take that, Jay Glazer, Mike Florio, KOC's back.
I'm Ron Johnson, former Gophers wide receiver, NFL wide receiver. And I want to let everybody know why I'm down with KOC. Yeah, you know me.
What? Oh, interesting.
You down with KOC? Yeah, you know me. Yeah.
Oh, my God. I'm Julie Daniels, sports reporter at Care 11. And if you see a fluffy cat run by, he's giving me all of the answers and analysis that you hear today.
Back to Reggie's thing. And by the way, I'm Sam Ekstrom. I've never seen someone more defensive than Jay Glazer for the past month. Like, Glazer has taken so much heat for this report. Maybe it's not his fault. Maybe he was just fed, information by an agent that he was sort of forced to report, and he did so to maintain a relationship. But he went off yesterday because he keeps taking all this criticism, and he went off again like, hey, I just did my job. But you know what? I think Glazer needed to have a little more common sense in the vetting of the report. I mean, just read the room, man. Read the room. This is a 34-17 coach. He's winning 2/3 of his games. He's got the highest winning percentage in Vikings history, and he's won divisions and gotten to the playoffs with 13 and 14 wins. He's doing it with limited cap space, with stopgap quarterback Sam Darnold. This was never going to happen. He was never going to be traded, Ron. Like, I thought it was a bit of a ridiculous story from the beginning, and I think it's weird that it became a thing at all. What do you think?
Yeah, a lot of people always try to throw stories out there because I think sometimes the media, and people don't realize this. I've been to a couple dinners now with a couple Vikings front office people. Have another Spades karaoke night coming up with a Vikings employee, VP at their house. And so we always have these conversations because it comes up, and it's funny that the media can kind of steer the front office sometimes, whether it's, hey, there's so much negative press, we got to get away from this, or there's so much positive press, we be dumb enough, unless you're the New York Giants and you just don't care what your people are telling you, or your own son saying who you should draft. It's one of those things that I think Jay Glazer got sold a bill of goods. I think whoever put that out there did exactly what worked, which is let's get Kevin O'Connell under contract. Let's not go another season without it. Florio, I think, has ran with the Glazer talk. When you think about Florio and Sims just going with it, and Florio tries to push that narrative because he thinks if it happens, then I'm right. So that's all it is. I think people love to push a narrative, hoping that they'll be right. And then when they're wrong, they got to tuck their tail between their legs. That's why I stay away from that stuff. I don't try to drop news. Even if I know the news, I just wait because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yes, you were first to it. You tweeted it first. Your network is going to pay you for the scoop. But then when you're wrong, you look like Tony Romo trying to say you should sneak the ball here. You throw a pass. It just doesn't work.
Julia, this is the thing that got me about it. This is not some ownership group that's known to be chintzy. This is not Daniel Snyder. This is not Al Davis. These are the Wilfs we're talking about. They're some of the most generous owners in the National Football League and all of sports. You want a stadium? Here's $500 million to help build it. You want a practice facility? Let's develop it. right? They've never spared expenses. So the thought that this negotiation would be some kind of contentious deal. I mean, we see KOC and the Wilfs on the sideline before the games. They're hugging, they're high-fiving. Wilfs are in the locker rooms after the game. Where was this tension? I never felt the tension, and I never anticipated that to be a problem.
Yeah, they're a very involved ownership group. There's no I think sometimes you'll see owners that keep a distance from teams, the players, the coaches, the personnel, just kind of keep their distance as if they're a little bit better than them. The Wilfs are not. Ziggy is out there in a suit and tie, standing next to, before JJ McCarthy got hurt, he was out there in July in a suit and tie with the quarterbacks, watching what was going on out on the practice field. They're very involved. The tension, no. I heard rumors of this, when I was out at the facility of is there something going on? There was no confirmation of anything, but there were little bits and pieces of people saying these things. We talked about it in the sports department, and I was kind of shocked to hear that because it doesn't really sound like the Wilfs to do something like that. They go up and they talk to everybody everywhere. There's no energy of being pretentious or anything like that. So this was also just not really a shocking surprise to me. I will say Jay Glazer was used as a pawn in someone else's game in this instance. But Kevin O'Connell, there's no reason to not extend him. He's already made history as Vikings head coach. He's leaps and bounds ahead of where a lot of people start out as a head coach in the NFL. So not shocking, but yeah, I would say just as somebody who is out at the facility often and sees the Wilfs around, and also the Wilfs are not the sneaky kind of people, to go around. They're just kind of going to tell you how it is. I've had to ask hard questions about things that don't even relate to football when it comes to the Wilfs, and they're very open and honest with answers about things. They're not the type to just try and play in somebody's face, I think.
Yeah, Reggie, let me tee you up with a couple numbers here. Kevin O'Connell with his preferred quarterback. So this discludes the second half of last year after Cousins got hurt. So with his preferred quarterback starting, 31-11 record. If he averages 11 wins over the next 3 years, which is not a guarantee, but I think it's also possible, he would have a better winning percentage than Mike Tomlin through Mike Tomlin's first 6 seasons. And that's definitely within the realm of possibility. We're talking about a coaching record that could be among the best in NFL history before it's all said and done.
Yeah, he's the fastest coach to 30 wins in Vikings history, which is crazy because it took him 46 games, and it could have been even less than that, like you said, if last year didn't kind of crash and burn with the quarterback situation that they had, Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, and just the disaster that it was the last 4 or 5 games of the season. But look, 34-17 through 3 seasons. I think the only thing that you can maybe knock him for is lack of postseason success so far. That first year, you say, oh, okay, maybe that's on him. This year, you say, it might be on him, but he took Sam Darnold to the playoffs. There's one side that says, well, if you took him to the playoffs, you should be able to win some playoff games with this guy. And then there's another side that's like, well, this was supposed to be the rebuilding year, and you got to 14 wins with the guy that many deemed to be a bust before this year. And so you were kind of playing with house money all year. So I think, 0-2 in the postseason so far. And I thought it was interesting. There was a general theme, Kevin O'Connell, Mark Wilf, talking about bringing a championship to Minnesota. It starts with winning in the playoffs first. And so that's something that, is the next phase of Kevin O'Connell's journey, getting a playoff win, which is interesting because, he comes to Minnesota coming off of a Super Bowl win with the Rams. So he's done it. He sees what it looks like. He knows what it takes. And so now you just kind of want to see some stability in the quarterback room and some stability with the team going through the postseason. That's kind of like the next level of success. But I think what was interesting about the whole thing is just the fact that it was brought up anyway. I don't know that it really came from Kevin O'Connell's camp. Maybe maybe he was a little frustrated that there hadn't been talks before, now before, he might go into the season as like a, lame duck on the last year of a deal. But it almost seemed to come out of nowhere. And, it's interesting because Jay Glazer does break a lot of things. I don't think he's like at the Schefter, Ian Rappaport mold because he doesn't have the volume. But like every now and again, Glazer will just like have something that you're like, oh, okay. Like last Sunday, he broke the news that Eddie George was going to interview for the Bears head coaching job, and nobody had that anywhere. And then the next day, the Bears tweet out, yeah, we just interviewed Eddie George for our head coaching job. And it's like, oh, okay. Like he has some connections and he has some scoopage, as he likes to say. But this whole thing just was bizarre. Like it seemed to annoy Kevin O'Connell almost when it was brought up about, him possibly getting traded for and, all that. Like he kind of doubled down like, hey, this is where I want to be. That's nothing that I really even want to give any, talk to. And so it was just a weird situation from the jump. But it is interesting though, like once all that noise kind of came out, like it didn't really take that long after, the offseason kind of started for the Vikings where the Wolves kind of locked them up. I'm interested to see what the numbers are. They said it was a multi-year extension, but we don't really have the numbers. We saw that Ben Johnson, I know we'll get to it. The number was about 13 mil per. And so if he's getting that, I imagine that, Kevin O'Connell is probably getting that or more with this new deal that he has. So I'm interested to see what the numbers look like and how many years he gets. Like, did he get another 4-year? Did he get another 5-year? Those are not, the coaching salaries are not so easily accessed by us, but I'm interested to see what those numbers look like because, through the first 3 years, like I said, minus the Super Bowl, minus the playoff success, like this is one of the greatest 3-year starts to a head coaching career that we've seen.
And the one thing I'll say though, like I've seen like a snippet of it just because we had to do a thing for it. It's when you're a new head. So think about this: when an extension versus a new head coach, you don't have to do an extension like the Bears are desperate, so they have to pay a lot of money. The Vikings are not desperate. Kevin O'Connell has been here. He knows that there's other things in there. I will say there are incentives in this that I think are obtainable with JJ McCarthy, but we'll see. But I don't think the Vikings have to jump like that where they need to go to 15 million. It doesn't matter anyway, though, because coaching salaries don't hit your salary cap. But I definitely know Kevin O'Connell is going to have it's right around, I think, 10 million or a little bit above 10. But there are some escalators in there for him. Now, that stuff doesn't have to be disclosed, whether it gets out or not. Adam Schefter, somebody's going to, pay somebody, or somebody's just going to want to be cool and say, hey, Shefty, I saw the paperwork when he came down to sign it. Whatever it might be. But the biggest thing about it is incentives. And with the rookie quarterback, Sam and I talked about this yesterday, with a rookie quarterback, the Minnesota Vikings have a chance to do what the Washington Commanders just did, and that's build a team around a rookie, build a team around a quarterback not taking a lot of money from you, and maybe go to the Super Bowl.
It is so split right now. All the speculation about McCarthy versus Darnold, and I feel like they're going to go with McCarthy, but I keep seeing insiders, quote unquote, and maybe not even insiders, maybe just people, versed in the NFL who are prognosticating that they're going to re-sign Darnold. And it's really 50-50 right now. And I can't get a good read on it. But when you look at the coaching carousel, Julia, in the NFC North right now, the Vikings get continuity, right? It looks like Brian Flores is coming back. Brian Flores did not advance in any of his endeavors to become a head coach. He's likely back. You get the whole staff back. I think Josh McCown, too. I haven't seen anything on Josh McCown leaving. So you get the gang back together. The Lions lose Aaron Glenn to the Jets. Ben Johnson goes to the Bears. Interdivision coaching swap. Lions also lose their defensive line coach, for what it's worth. He goes to be a coordinator in New England. So Julia, how do you think, primarily the Ben Johnson move, and I guess toss Aaron Glenn in there as well, like the Lions, do you feel like the Lions have been significantly weakened by losing their coordinators, and what does it do to empower the Bears to get Ben Johnson in that building with Caleb Williams?
Yeah, I mean, you've seen what Ben Johnson has done with the Lions offense too. I think it'll be my prediction is this will be incredible for Caleb Williams' growth. He'll finally have somebody that kind of speaks his own language and is there. I mean, that's a huge reason why they bring a guy like Ben Johnson in because of what they've seen him do with Jared Goff and the Lions. Finally, Caleb Williams, and let's not act like Caleb Williams had a bad rookie start given the circumstances that he walked into. I mean, sure, 5-12, not good, right? But he's had all of these defensive-minded coaches. He's not really been given like the solid chance with the people around him to develop him with the talent that he has. I mean, when they played the Vikings the first time, I think we all said that was probably his best game that he played, that overtime game versus the Vikings. And that's when we were like, oh, okay, so this guy is not like a flop as the number one pick. There's a reason that he's number one. We just have yet to see it. So I'm excited to see what Ben Johnson does. Ben Johnson also knows what the NFC North is made of. He's been there. He knows what it's like to compete at the highest level of the NFC North. So I think it'll be really good for Caleb Williams to have him there. I think it's interesting that it's been kind of like a NFC North musical chairs, but I think that Caleb Williams regressed a little bit and his confidence was shot a little bit at times because of where he was and the team that he was surrounded by and the personnel he was surrounded by. So I think Ben Johnson coming in is one of the best case scenarios for him, and excited to see what his future looks like as the Bears quarterback with somebody who can maybe speak his language a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think it's some chicken or egg here, Reggie, because was Ben Johnson so elite as a play caller because of the personnel he had? He was top 5 in offense all 3 of his years as their coordinator. Or, did he make the personnel better with his coaching? And that's going to be the great question, because you couldn't be any more apples to oranges than the Bears and the Lions personnel wise. Lions, great offensive line, great playmakers, quarterback that's all precision and timing based. And now you got the Bears, terrible offensive line, a quarterback that has no sense of timing, holds the ball too long, runs around, the opposite of Jared Goff. So in some ways, I think that the Lions, whoever they hire to be their coordinator, they still have the continuity. They're only losing like one key piece on offense, really. I think one lineman, Zeitler. They're getting a lot of people back. They're going to have continuity with the personnel. And the Bears were chaos all year long, right? So what can Ben Johnson do? Will he change the chaos, or will the chaos change Ben Johnson?
Well, it's interesting because I was listening to Dan Orlovsky yesterday talk about how, hiring Ben Johnson was a good move for Caleb, but he's trying to figure out if it's a good move for the Bears because, they hired a defensive guy before, then they switch over and hire an offensive guy because they have this young quarterback. But can he, galvanize and lead the team? Hiring him just to be this quarterback guru, sometimes these guys who are offensive minded guys, like they're not necessarily built to be head coaches. But here's the thing about Ben Johnson. This dude has kind of been in the lab. He was a walk-on quarterback at North Carolina, got a chance to, really learn the system and grind as a backup. Then he takes all these different jobs, he started as a graduate assistant with Boston College. And then, he goes and does just about every job that you can have with the Dolphins. And then he goes over to Detroit with Dan Campbell and works his way up to offensive coordinator. He's been in the lab. And so what I think is interesting is with him having been a quarterback, kind of having that general of the offense type of a mindset before, I think that really serves Caleb Williams well. And it served Jared Goff well, got Jared Goff paid, after Sean McVay basically gave up on him and traded him to Detroit. It was thought that, he would just be like a bridge to the next quarterback that maybe the Lions drafted. And instead they build this bully and, go to the NFC Championship game last year and, the upset this year. But it seemed to be a good marriage. And I think if you're Caleb Williams and you look at what he even did with Jared Goff, you're like, oh, yeah, we can cook. Like this might be like the best marriage that he's had since college with Lincoln Riley. And so I think it's going to be better. And I think, looking at the offense, that was what was talked about before the season. Like, can the Bears win 9-10 games with all of this talent that they have on offense? And so he goes from a talented offense to another talented offense with a quarterback that he can mold. And I think, they'll be better. Will they challenge for a division crown? Maybe not, but I think they'll be a lot more competitive this year, and that certainly makes the NFC North a lot more competitive because Green Bay is going to be there. I'm wondering though, because you heard Dan Campbell this week talk about how losing his coordinators, he wants to make sure that they keep the offense the same, so they build on what they had already. Yeah. They keep the defense the same, so they build what they had already, and they get a lot of these pieces back that they were injury riddled all season. And so you get some of the key pieces back to try to challenge again. But that's why it's so tough in the NFL because, I think it was Tom Brady talking about your championship window and how every year it closes and you got to challenge, to try to get back again. They've had some magic that they've captured the last 2 seasons. And, one of Ben Johnson's most memorable play calls on his way out of Detroit is putting the ball in Jameson Williams' hands and having him throw a pass that's intercepted. And that basically kind of put the game away for the Lions. And then the next day he's like, all right, I'm on to Chicago. It's been real. It's been real, Detroit. And so I think that's something that you look at and you're like, man, can the Lions do it again? Because they had something. They messed it up last year, Dan Campbell being Dan Campbell in the NFC Championship game. And then this year, the upset in the divisional round. So I don't know. I think the division will continue to be competitive. Will we see 3 NFC North teams in the playoffs? I'm not sure, but I think it's going to be real interesting. I think Ben Johnson makes Chicago maybe competitive for the first time since Nagy's first year.
Yeah. It's been a minute for the Bears. And Ron, do you think that you've been a coach? Can a coach come in and wave a magic wand and suddenly run trick plays like the way the Lions did? Because that takes trust, that takes practice, that takes a lot of continuity with a strong foundation. Do you think that's going to be the Bears? Like, are the Bears going to be running trick plays up the wazoo just like the Lions did? Or the Lions going to keep trying to do it without Ben Johnson? Is this going to be the trickiest division in NFL history?
Yes, I think so. But here's the thing. Here's where I go with this, though. It's both. So I know you said chicken or egg. It's personnel, but it's also know-how. Because if you look at Ben Johnson, he also ran some trick plays probably when he shouldn't have. The Jameson Williams double reverse pass interception. And you saw Antoine Randall look at him like, dude, what are you doing, man? Like, what are you doing? Because you have to think about it. Antoine Randall was a trick pass receiver for the Steelers. Like, he did that for the Washington football team, because he was my teammate there. And so, like, that's what Randall was known for. He was a really good receiver, really good slot receiver. He was also a guy that could run trick plays. So when you put Ben Johnson with Randall, it's like, hey, what did you guys do in Pittsburgh? Hey, we did this, man. The receivers did this, blah, blah. And now you have those minds that can talk it out. So I don't think this was 100% Ben Johnson. I think this was a collective of coaches in that room. And so that's what I wonder, too, is Ben Johnson builds his staff because he's on the phone right now with guys. So whether it's Antoine Randall, whether it's a defensive a defensive line coach or a linebacker coach, whatever. Like, maybe he's calling the Vikings guys and Josh McCown. Like, he's on the phone trying to build a staff. And I've seen that. Like, I've watched Tony Dungy do that when he bought me in. And then he went out and got Frank Wright. And then he went out and got, I think, Mark, I forgot his name. He was the tight end for the Bills. But him and Frank Wright were teammates. He came in and he was the tight ends coach. So I've seen that, what that looks like. You basically call people you call friends, you call people you trust. And so I'll be interested to see what Ben Johnson builds. But it is a little bit of can that offensive line hold up for 4 seconds or 3 seconds? I think it's like 3.78 seconds is what you need to run the trick play behind the line of scrimmage. Can that offensive line do that? Like, I don't know. Like, the Lions, yes, they are loaded at the offensive line position. They are loaded at the receiver position and young through the draft. They are loaded at running back. The Bears are not. And so, yeah, you could try it, but I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, honestly, it's like Chris Helmsworth walking into a bar and saying the most offensive thing ever and still having 3 to 4 people come up to him and want to hang out with him versus if it was like Danny DeVito. It's not working for Danny DeVito. He's got to be Prince Charming. He's got to say all the right things, or he's got to pull out $1 million and say, look, I got $1 million. Like, certain people have the ability to do certain things. And that's why, I mean, even looking in Disney, like when you look at Disney cartoons, it's always that way. The person with the most stuff gets it their way. You know, I can't remember. I think it was the skunk. They used to bounce around and try to get the other gal, or the cat that tried to get the skunk. I can't remember that whole thing, but he always would lose to the skunk with more money, or the cat with more money, because the skunk girl would always go with them. It's always about having the stuff.
What movie is this?
It's a cartoon. I can't remember which cartoon it was. Like it was Pepe Le Pew, I think, isn't it? Isn't it Pepe Le Pew? Maybe. He was always trying to like get I think he was a skunk trying to get a girl that was a cat. And then there was another skunk dude that like had more money than him, and he would always like take her from him. But it's just that. It's like whoever has the most stuff ends up having the most success with it. And that's what the NFL has been about. It's an embarrassment of riches for some offenses, and that was the Lions this year. Now, I don't know what it's going to look like for the Bears, and I'm not going to say who told me this, but I've talked to a couple former Bears that said they would never have left Detroit if they were Ben Johnson. And the only reason is going to be, are the Bears willing to not be cheap and go get the pieces that they need, or are they going to continue to try to do the same thing and expect a different result? Because if you go back to Rex Grossman, and when they went to the Super Bowl, they spent a ton of money on the defense. Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Julius Peppers, so on and so, Alex Brown, Peanut Tillman. They had Pro Bowlers. They had guys. You had Olin Kreutz at center, one of the best offensive linemen in NFL history. Like you had Thomas Jones at running back. You had Des Clark. You had Bernard Berrien. So they had the weapons. So it didn't matter that their quarterback was inept. You can't do that if you have a great quarterback, but if you don't have the pieces. I don't know if Ben Johnson gets it done. He's going to try it, though. He will try it.
Yeah. Let's pause when we return. Some off-season prescriptions for how to fix the Vikings' flaws, plus a divisional round what if coming up on our special Wednesday Minnesota football party. Folks, at FanDuel, you got to take advantage of their new offer for the final drive of the NFL playoffs. New customers can bet $5, get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. $300 goes a long way. You can use that on NBA, NHL, college basketball. No more college football. That's all done until next season. I'm eyeing the Commanders plus 6.5 and the Bills plus 1.5. I like the underdogs on the spread this weekend. Now, for that $5 bet, get the $300, find a good money line. Find a juicy money line that's got a high probability of winning. Then you got the $300 in your pocket, and you are set for a while at FanDuel. Very easy to use, FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's simple to navigate. You can bet before the game or during the game. Before the game, during the game with the live lines. You got future bets galore. Lots of wagering options at FanDuel and FanDuel.com. Bet 5, get 300 in bonus bets, and make the playoffs unforgettable with FanDuel. They're an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, make sure you check out all of our Minnesota football parties. We got Mondays, Thursdays with Arif Hassan, Luke Inman, Luke Braun doing this show on Wednesdays, and Ron Johnson's got the Ron Johnson show on Tuesdays. So let's start with this quickly. Thinking about what we saw in the divisional round, Eagles win in the snow. The Commanders win in Detroit. There were a couple paths where the Vikings could have played those teams, right? If the Vikings had beaten the Rams, they would have gone to Philly to play the Eagles. If the Vikings had been the 1 seed, like Detroit was, they could have been the ones hosting the Commanders. So after seeing what we saw, Reggie, start with you. After seeing what we saw, how do you think it would have gone for the Vikings in the divisional round?
Well, I think especially if they win that game against the Rams, I think they have some confidence, they have some momentum, and I think, we potentially see like a shootout in that divisional round. And so it's hard to say just because it didn't happen, but I think they have a chance to do some work. It's so weird seeing how the pressure didn't seem to bother Sam Darnold for most of the season. And then in those games that really mattered, all of a sudden he just spazzed out. It was just kind of weird to see. And not that, the games that he played before weren't big games. I guess, the implications were much more significant in those games. But, the game against Seattle, the game against Green Bay, like, he was balling. And I just don't understand what happened there. I wish we would have seen the Sam Darnold that we saw earlier in the season, especially after that Jacksonville Jaguars loss, where he seemed to get a little bit of his swagger back. The guy that was dancing in the locker room after they threw water on him, and Kevin O'Connell standing in the corner like
that was that was it right there. They celebrated way too early.
Man,
way too early. Water shower.
It was crazy, but it was like the best game that he's ever played. So I kind of understand that, but it just all went downhill from there. So, I would like to think that they would have made it, competitive, but it's just hard to, I don't know, because what you see from this playoff so far, especially the divisional round, like, they say any given Sunday or any given Saturday, I guess some of the games were played. Anybody can be beat at any time. And so, we saw that with the Commanders taking care of Detroit. Like, that was kind of crazy just to even watch. They bullied the bully. And so I think the Vikings would have had a chance if they would have played the type of ball that got them there. But because they didn't, it was just hard to see it.
Yeah. I mean, Ron, you were on this the whole time. You thought the Commanders were a tough matchup. And after seeing it myself, I tend to think they would have had a harder time with the Commanders than they would have had with the Eagles.
Yeah, and so the Commanders, when you think about what they do with the quarterback, I think that was the key. And that's why, I think a lot of teams with J.J. McCarthy, same thing. If you can get a little bit of movement, a little bit of run, a little bit of – because so many teams love to blitz now and play man zero, and that leaves your cornerbacks and everybody in the back end vulnerable that they don't even know the quarterback is taking off because their job is to plaster, and they're not watching the quarterback. They're expecting the front seven or the front six, whoever blitz, to get to them. So I don't know. Like when you look at the way the Vikings play, you look at the way this playoffs has played out. I think we talked about this too, Sam, is like, were the Vikings as good as we think they are? Did they deserve the 5 seed? Should they have been a 6 or 7 seed? Were the Packers better? By the way, it's Pepe Le Pew and Penelope Pussycat. She was a black and white cat that Pepe Le Pew thought every once in a while, like, she would run into white paint, so he assumed she was a skunk like him, and she wasn't. She was a black and white cat. So that was the whole deal. And then his rival was always just a random cat or somebody else with money. So yeah, that was.
Glad we got that figured out.
Yeah, it was Looney Tunes is where it's from. So it's just short cartoons of Pepe Le Pew trying to go after Penelope Cat. But anyway, so when you look at the Vikings against Philly, I just don't know. Like, I think Reggie's right. Like, it kind of fell off at the end. Like, I don't know. I have no idea what was going on with Kevin O'Connell coaching. Again, he's a human being. And I'm not saying the contract extension was weighing on him or the rumors were weighing on him, the reports were weighing on him, but we're still human beings. I know he has some LA ties, and so we know what's going on with the wildfires. Again, there's a lot involved in this that we're not thinking about. Kevin O'Connell's wife from has West Coast ties as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on that, as you think about it, like, well, maybe there's other, because we think it's all about just football and you can turn it off. It's hard to turn it off sometimes. And a lot of people brought that up, but yeah, I don't know how they would have fared. I think it played out the way it would have. Like, I just don't know if the Vikings would have continued to get out coached. Like, I just, because the Lions exposed them, and I forgot who did the game for the Rams. I said the Rams basically did the same thing the Lions did. Like, look, let's just play coverage. Let's leave one guy back there and let's get after him. And we're going to make Sam Darnold have to decide. We're going to overload one side, see if the Vikings figure it out. And if they never figure it out, let's just keep doing it. And that's what they did. They would go 4-7. And if you pick the wrong side, we're coming. And it's a chess match because in your mind, and I get it, because it sounds simple, but if I go 4-7, my mind is like, well, they're going to loop and put 6 on one side. Like, they're never going to stay this. And you got to play the chess game. And the Vikings lost the chess match.
Yeah, Julia, biggest disappointment for me personally is that we didn't get the chance to see the Vikings play in the snow. How fun would that have been?
I know.
In the blizzard in Philly. That was a bummer.
I know. I don't know. I'm gonna agree with Ron here and say, like, it's hard to kind of go back and then think about where things would have been. I think that mindsets would have been different if that Lions loss hadn't been so horrible. But I will say, like I texted you guys about this, I was really not confident in a Sam Darnold, comeback after that game. And I know it's not all of Sam Darnold's fault, but I think his confidence was seriously shot. Also, the defense they're exhausted. They exhausted all, aspects of their game by the time they got to the wild card weekend. I just think had they played differently against the Lions, then maybe with a bye, they could have, I just don't know. When I talked to Stephon Gilmore after the Lions game, the week after, he talked about how they felt like they were exposed in a good way, but I don't think they had time to figure out all of the holes that the Lions exposed about them. They just didn't have the time to fix anything. I'm not sure a bye that week would have even helped fix the holes that were so exposed. It was like the Lions figured out the formula versus the Vikings. And then, like you said, the Rams went and ran with it. And that's, we saw how that all played out. So I'm just not really sure. And honestly, I don't trust the Vikings against the Eagles ever. I have learned better than that, especially in Philadelphia. So I'm going to be honest. Having seen what I've seen, I don't think the Vikings beat the Eagles or the Commanders in the postseason.
Yeah, it's so hard to imagine the Vikings playing a clean game after the last two games they played.
Right.
But if we're talking about the Seahawks or Packers games that they won, it's very easy to see that team winning in any building. It's just football's weird too. Like I told Ron this, a 2-week sample size is all you need to sort of change your reality. And the Vikings ended with such two bad games that it totally changes the way we perceive their potential and everything. Speed round, 1 minute each. We're going to go around and give one area on offense, one area on defense that you want the Vikings to address this offseason. Can be specific, can be broad, whatever you want. Let's start with Ron here. One offensive need to address in the offseason. You got 1 minute. Hit us with something.
Offensive guard. I don't even think I need a minute. Offensive guards. You got to figure out those offensive guards. I can say it 15 times. Offensive guards, offensive guards, offensive guards. Like Beetlejuice, please appear. And again, I like Dalton Reisner. I like Blake Brandel. I just feel like the type of offense Kevin O'Connell wants to run, I don't know if those are both. Like you have two guys that are similar. You need to find like a Quentin Nelson, and that's hard to find. But yeah, you got to go offensive guard. You got to find you a bruiser, a beast, one guy that can be a manipulator, an absolute nasty, dirty dog, and then one guy that can be your pretty guy that pulls and does the other stuff.
Julia.
We're going offense and defense here?
Just offense right now.
Offense? Okay. I think Aaron Jones is a short-term solution. They need to figure out a long-term solution at running back. And they need to figure out the running game just in general. So I think Aaron Jones, he is 30, which is not old, but it's also not young for a running back. That is a brutal position to play. And this is the best and the healthiest he's been in a very long time to have the longevity he had this season. But I'm not sure how long that lasts for. So I think you have to find some kind of long-term solution for your backfield.
I'm in agreement with both of you, and I'm going to merge your two ideas into, in the draft, day 3 of the draft, I want you to find a run blocking savant in the draft who can come in, be part of a young pipeline of offensive linemen. The Vikings have not added to their offensive line pipeline in a while. They've kind of gone the veteran route. I searched on Pro Football Focus the best run blocker in college football. His name is Addison West from Western Michigan, day 3 projected pick. I want Addison West in my building. I want the best run blocking prospect in college football so that you can run the ball. 3 years now with a below average running game. That's got to change. Reggie Wilson, what do you got?
Well, just because I am going last here and you told us to be different, I also kind of agree with Julia on another position, though. I think, Garrett Bradbury stepped in and he had a career year, earned a new contract, but hasn't necessarily lived up to that. So I think that, to Ron's point, going guard, I think you have to solidify the interior of that offensive line. And maybe you try to look for an upgrade at the center position for long term as well, because I don't think Garrett Bradbury is bad. I think he has shown himself to be a pro in the league, but I do think that there were times where he was a turnstile. There were times where he just got bulldozed. And I think if they found a way to upgrade at the center position, I think they would be able to run the ball better, to both of you guys' points, or to all you all's points, really. And so I think if they were able to find just a road grader of a center to go with a better guard, maybe on both sides, I think they would be able to solidify the interior of that line and find some running lanes, because, from the teams that we saw, like the Lions, when Jahmyr Gibbs hits that hole, he's running. When Saquon Barkley is hitting the hole, he's running. And so I think if they are able to solidify the interior of that line, they find a better run game, and they don't have those, as Kevin O'Connell says, those third and weighty downs that he's got the 5 and 7 step drops with Darnold or whoever his quarterback is to try to, drive the ball downfield to pick up a first down. Maybe, you're ahead of the chains a little bit more, and you can do better and not have to have so much, ride on these third downs, because you only got 1 or 2 yards in the run game on first and second down.
All right, Julia, kick us off, a minute each on defense. Probably some more holes to fill on the defensive side, can be a little more different in the way we address this. Julia, what do you got?
Yeah, I think the D-backs are obviously something that they have to take a look at. You have to also know, like, is Harrison Smith retiring? What's happening with the safety position? And what are they doing with Cam Bynum too? So I'll stick with the safeties and say, like, there's a lot up in the air, a lot of question marks when it comes to that group. But if Harrison Smith does retire, that's like a huge loss for the Vikings. They have got to figure out what to do with that position. So I'm just going to stick with the safeties, because I know that D-backs in general, there's some other things that have to be addressed with the D-backs.
Yeah. I'll go to corner with mine, because you're losing them all, right? You've got Mekhi Blackman in the building, and you've got Dwight McGlothern, and that's it. I'd like you to re-sign Byron Murphy. Now that's going to be expensive, but you have the money. I would go out and sign an additional veteran cornerback. So you have Murphy on one side, another vet on the other side, then you draft somebody, and then you might be good. The name I have in mind is Asante Samuel Jr., who's played 4 years already with the Chargers. He might be on his way out. Really, really good, like Quasi type prospect, someone who's played well, coming off injury, might depress his value a little bit. I like Asante Samuel Jr. as a possible multi-year guy. I don't really want the 1-year fixes as they've done the past couple of years. This year, that was really patched together at the last second. I would like some longer-term options. So find someone on the young side, Asante Samuel Jr. I'm sticking to that projection. Reggie Wilson, who you got, or what do you got?
Yeah, to your point, Sam, to corner, I also like DJ Reed. We've seen him against the Vikings several times. He's still only just 28 years old. So I would like to see them bring somebody like him in as well at that cornerback position. But because we can't do the same thing, I say, Jalen Redmond was a bright spot this year, coming from Arlington in the XFL, and played well, and they signed him back. But I do think that they need someone else on the interior of that defensive line that could help with some of the run stuffing, but also who has some pass rush ability as well, because, they got Harrison Phillips. But I think if maybe they got an upgrade at some of the end spots, that could really kind of put some pressure on the offensive line, that would be helpful as well. So, I know usually the linebackers are the guys who do the most damage, and you got Dallas Turner and Grenard and Van Ginkel. But if you got some pieces that were really disruptive on the interior of the defensive line or on the edge, you kind of look at what the Rams were able to do and how, Verse was kind of eating, and, they got Braden Fisk and he was doing damage, and they got Young on the inside as well. He was kind of making it hard for Darnold and that interior of the offensive line as well. And so if you have some interior help or on the edge, like I said, on the defensive line, I think that would be helpful for that defense as well.
Ron.
So, I mean, that's everything. That's everybody.
Yeah, it is.
I kind of got to agree with Reggie, though. Give me an Aaron Donald. Give me, like, it doesn't have to be an expensive Aaron Donald, but give me something like Aaron Donald. Because if you have a true 3-4 defense, or like a Pat Williams, a big beef feeder. I mean, honestly, like, we had the guy in the building and he didn't do a lot. And then he goes to the Ravens and he does a lot. Like, I forgot his name. What was the dude's name?
Michael Pierce.
Pierce. Like, we had that. He's a disruptor. He's a people eater. And that's what you need in a 3-4. You need a big dude that can take on 3 guys and then free up your linebackers. I was literally talking to Kevin Williams about this, because Kevin Williams said he learned the 3-4 under Ray Lewis, and he said he talked about that, about how the 3-4 defense for interior guys hated the fact that the guards were uncovered. Well, that's when you get big fat dudes like Pat Williams to say, hey, I got you, or Saragusa, I got you. That's what the Vikings need. They need a I got you guy. I'm going to take up 2 guys every single time, if not 3.
Yeah.
And again, I love Harrison Phillips. I just think he's a better suited 4-3 defensive tackle.
Yeah, that's fair to say. Yeah, they get Phillips back on the interior next year, and then Bullard and Tillery are free agents. They have to kind of remake that position as well.
They need to put those 2 guys together. Give me a 340-pound guy.
Bold predictions for the championship games on Sunday next on the Minnesota Football Party. We are presented today by Talkspace. Therapy is super important. I've done it. It's a game changer. It can manage stress, improve sleep, improve your communication with your colleagues, your loved ones, your spouses. Find the right therapist, and fitting sessions into busy schedules, that can be challenging. That's where Talkspace comes in. The leading virtual therapy provider makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. Signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours, and it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even manage your therapist or message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans, and for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize your mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL. Enter promo code SPACE80 to match with a licensed therapist today. Go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL. Enter code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for the show. Talkspace.com/LockedOnNFL. Promo code SPACE80. We conclude, as always, with bold predictions for Championship Sunday. Washington, Philadelphia, and the Bills and the Chiefs meet again in the playoffs. For the record, last week, Reggie, you had the Rams beating the Eagles. Incorrect. Close.
The snow, man. The snow messed it up. They were dropping the ball everywhere.
Rams were driving. I thought it was over. I thought the Rams were going to do it. Really good finish. Ron, you thought the 1s and 2s would all advance, which in a way was bold because you were predicting no upsets, and it turns out there was one upset. The Commanders ruined it for you. And I was the most wrong of anybody. I said the Lions would win by 20. I could not have been more incorrect. So we all sucked last week. What are our bold predictions this week? Let's start with Reggie Wilson. Give me something bold.
Something bold
and beautiful.
Give me the Commanders to the Super Bowl.
Commanders to the Super Bowl.
That was going to be mine.
All right.
Go ahead. Ron, do Bills to the Super Bowl, Ron.
That's what I was going to do. I'm going to take the Bills. Let me get the Bills. Somebody finally takes down Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift and Caitlin Clark with Blake, whatever her name is, Blakely, and all, her whole entourage, Ice Spice. Josh Allen will do it with his new girl, Gwen from Spider-Verse.
Julia.
Oh, come on, guys. So obviously, huge Jalen Hurts fan here, but I can't root against my namesake, Jaden Daniels. So I got to root for the Commanders and the Bills. Please, please. Listen, I am a Swiftie, and I think that the storyline has run out. We had it last year. Let's do something different. Let's see the Bills in the Super Bowl. So I'm going to agree with both of you guys. And I also think, how cool would it be to see Jaden Daniels in a Super Bowl?
Yeah, I'm a big Bills fan on Sunday, and it has nothing to do with the FanDuel parlay I have that has the Bills winning it all. I'm going to get real specific here with the Eagles-Commanders game. I think that the Commanders will avenge the Vikings. They will go to Philadelphia in a conference title game, and they will win 38-7 against the Eagles. And they will get exact revenge for the Vikings of 7 years ago. We'll take victories where we can get them.
I want to see that Zach Ertz, Nick Sirianni handshake after that one, because the last time was explosive. This one might get even worse.
Ooh.
Big Dom might have to step in.
Sirianni's a powder keg. Yeah.
He's waiting to explode on Nick. I mean, why would you be mad at a tight end for just saying something after he shakes your hand and then it becomes a fight? I'm waiting for that.
Sirianni's so immature, man. He's just riding with this really good team, so it doesn't even matter right now. But it's
And the one thing about Philly and DC and Baltimore fans is Minnesota fans are nice. So when they go to Philly, DC fans is showing up I wish you would. Please do something to us. Please do something to us.
Right hand up. Who are we? The
Commanders. They leave the DMV on Friday and they are prepared. Their cars are packed. They can drive. They got the things they need. Like Kevin Hart said, don't make me pop the trunk. Philly fans, there's some fans I think they know they can pick on, and Baltimore and DC, I don't know if those are the fans that you can pick on. So I'd be very, I mean, honestly, I think there was a Commanders fan. Didn't he get arrested for knocking people out? Or was that a Ravens fan? I couldn't remember which one it was. Remember the tall dude? He was going around town knocking people out, and he was either a Commanders fan or a Ravens fan, but he was knocking fans out in the street they had the opposite jersey on. And so I'm I think he's out of jail by now. He's out of jail now. So if he's going to Philly, watch out.
Trump
watch
out.
I will
they
say
might let
Sam,
him out of jail just for this game.
I will say, Sam, yesterday I saw Tyler Bass was trending on Twitter, and I was like, oh shoot. And I guess the narrative was that he's worked himself out of a rut because they've stuck with him. And I'm going into this game against the Chiefs, and now you've jinxed him. It's going to come down to a kicker, and he'll be wide left or wide right again, and the Chiefs will go back to the Super Bowl. Of course. Why would you do that to a kicker?
Yeah. Or the Chiefs will block the kick because they seem to do that a lot now. In closing, I got an email. I think it's just, is this clickbait by the Vikings? Kevin O'Connell named NFC Coach of the Year by 101 Awards. So this isn't the real Coach of the Year. This is a subcommittee that named him their Coach of the Year. So this isn't the big one. This is a conference Coach of the Year from I've never heard of 101 Awards before. So I got excited. I thought we had breaking news. I think we'll hold off on that until we don't get the real award until the honors show. Right? Which is, right before the Super Bowl. So we got a couple weeks to find out there. Minnesota Football Party will continue tomorrow with Luke Bronner-Repasan and Luke Inman. We'll talk more conference championships and Minnesota Vikings news. Thanks for joining us, and watch Care 11 with Reggie Wilson and Julia Daniels. Watch the Ron Johnson Show with Ron Johnson. Talk to you soon here on Locked On Sports Minnesota.